Okay, how's everyone doing? Good. Professor Allison, this is history six, no, 390, right? Constitution. Okay, very good. It's actually Constitution Part 2. Did anyone take Part 1? You would be good. Okay, good. Doesn't matter because everything changes in Part 2. Okay. Although, would you recommend they take Part 1? What do you think? They came back for Part 2, so the 50 people, other people who were in the class decided not to, but we'll have the happy few here. Okay. And what we'll be doing over the course of the semester is talking about the development of the Constitution of the United States, really since the time of the Civil War, which does, as I said, change everything. Questions that really loom very large for us in Part 1. What are the questions that loom large for us in Part 1? Maybe we should find some of those people who've not come back for Part 2. It's been a long time. I'm basing on as well. They're all irrelevant now. Yes, most of them were resolved in the Civil War. And when was the Civil War?
1860.
Okay, close enough, 1861, 1865. And what was it about?
Pretty much like the recession of others.
Okay, yeah, 13 states seceded from the Union, saying that their ratification of the Constitution was no longer valid because on the other side, they changed their interpretation of it, so thus they were entitled to leave the Union because the states, according to this theory, had formed the Constitution, and then when the states decided they no longer liked it, they could leave. That was the theory of the Constitution, that it was a compact among the states. And the other side, those who, according to the agreed Southerners, were the cause of this, had a different theory of the Constitution. And does anyone know what that different theory was?
More state rights than the federal.
No, it's the opposite. See, this is what happens often when we know the words, we use them without thinking about what they mean. So this side, compact among the states are sovereign entities which had created this Constitution. The other side says, no, it is not a compact among states. It is, yes, a union of what? Of whom? No. See, that's what we're trying to get away from. Maybe we should just, we'll start over with it. We'll pretend this is Part 1, and we'll just by December we might get then to the beginning of the Civil War. No. According to this side, the states are the sovereign entities. The states had formed this compact, and according to the other side, that was not the case. So what then was their case? Who would form the compact? Anyone familiar with it? Yes.
I wasn't, but
Is anyone here read the Constitution? I should have brought copies.
a little bit.
Did you read the first line?
Oh,
We the people of the United States. Yes, that's the first line of it. And according to this side, it is a compact among the people of the United States, not the states. Okay, so that is, and there's much more to be said about this, whole issue, but anyway, this is the big discussion. Who is sovereign here? Is it the states or is it the people of the United States? And can you go on? Probably the people of the United States. Anyone? Yes. In order to form a more perfect union. That's good. Establish justice, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States. So that's the preamble of the Constitution. We give those who were able to chime in a round of applause for knowing it, because it is really a definition then of why we're doing this, why we're creating this union. And then in 1860-61 presidential election, people in some of the states don't like the result, and so they said, hey, you know what, we're seceding from the union. And actually, this is a photograph. Anyone know this building? It's the Capitol. And this is a photograph of the Capitol in 1860. So the building has not yet been finished. And who won the election of 1860? Abraham Lincoln. And Lincoln is on this side, and Lincoln, in his inaugural address, discusses secession, because once he is elected, states started seceding. That is, revoking the ratification of the Constitution. Their members of Congress resigned, went home in a huff, and all kinds of things happened between those days, the presidential election that has now happens in fall, and the president took office in March. So there's like 4 months in which states are seceding from the Union. Some states do, not all states do, not all of the aggrieved states do. As I said, 11 states secede beginning in December of 1860. Should I start asking you if you can name them? That'd be unfair. Yes, yes.
North Carolina, South Carolina.
North Carolina is not seceded right away, but go on.
South Carolina was the first.
Yes.
Virginia.
No, Virginia.
Uh,
There were 1 out of 3. So
Florida wasn't a state then.
Florida was a state, and it
Florida,
seceded.
Alabama, Mississippi,
Alabama, Mississippi,
Tennessee,
no,
Georgia,
Georgia,
Arkansas, Texas,
not Arkansas, but Texas,
Louisiana.
Louisiana. Okay, not Missouri. Mississippi, yes. That's not Kentucky. Okay, now Virginia, North Carolina, Arkansas, Tennessee will secede, but they don't until after April of 1861. Lincoln becomes president on March 4th, and these states begin seceding in the middle of April once the war begins. And okay, so Lincoln has like 6 weeks after he takes office before the war begins, and he wants to keep these states. And by the way, I mentioned these states saying they have this theory of the Constitution, the rationale for why they have the power to secede. What's their reason for wanting to secede? Yes. Yes, these states, their economies depended on slave labor, and so what? They wanted slavery and the others didn't, so what's the issue? Where? No. Because Lincoln says he has nothing, he's not gonna do anything about slavery within states. He recognizes that the states have power over their own domestic institutions. The federal government cannot do anything about slavery in the states. I didn't mean to jump in, but Dustin was gonna get to this, yes.
The new states, he doesn't want slavery.
Which new states?
Any new state?
Kansas is one. I mean, because there were lots of federal territories, and beginning in the 1830s, there's an argument that the federal government cannot prevent slavery in the territory. Although in 1820, the federal government did not that, saying, okay, no slavery in essentially this territory west of the Mississippi River. Okay, and then in the 1850s, 30s, and 40s, there's this idea of why should slavery not be allowed into these new territories? And in the 1850s, this is the big burning political issue. Should slavery be allowed to spread into the territories? And in 1820, big fight over this, which involves two states.
Missouri, Kansas.
Kansas a little later, it's a trick question. Missouri is becoming a state. It's in its territory that back in 1788, Congress had said won't have any slavery, or Congress in 1788 said no slavery north of the Ohio River. Now you have this territory purchased from France in what, 1803, 1804, and now that part of it's going to become a state, and there's a move to allow slavery in it. There's another move saying, hey, wait a minute, that's north of the Ohio River, even though the Ohio River is east of it. Then you're familiar with the Ohio River, by the way. I know these, I always imagine these geographic markers are in your minds, but I realize if you get much, yes,
It's the southern border, is it not, of Ohio?
it's the southern border of Ohio. That's very good. You knew Ohio was somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, Missouri becomes a state. They're allowed to have slavery, and Maine also becomes a state, although there's no push to have slavery in Maine. And then the rest of this territory, in the Missouri Compromise, it says no slavery in the rest of this territory until 1850, because the United States acquires a big chunk of territory in the 1840s that is south of that line. It's the 3630 line, for those who are keeping track. That's the southern border of Missouri. Has anyone ever been to Missouri? Yeah. You want to say anything about it?
I just had a way over there.
Okay. Anyway, all this territory, most of the, in 1820, there's new territory north of 3630 line. And the United States really didn't have much territory south of the 3630 line until something happens in the 1840s. Anyone know what that is? Yes. It is not the Louisiana Purchase. That was the thing. That was the thing that brought all this territory in. Oh, that's okay. That's okay. I've been seeing a therapist all summer who's weaned me from humiliating people who are bold enough to speak up. And then immediately I make them feel, no, so thank you. But it's something else. Yeah. It was a war with Mexico, yes, by which the United States acquires lots of territory that is south of 3630, extending to the Pacific Ocean. The question becomes what to do with all this territory, and why not allow people with their slaves to move into this territory and make a go of it. And that provokes lots of controversy in the 1850s. I know it will makes you really glad to live in a time where politics was much less turbulent and, angry, that we're not in the 1850s when a senator said he speaks up on the street. Charles Sumner, not my favorite senator, gets eaten nearly to death by a guy who doesn't like a speech Sumner gave on the floor of the Senate. Anyway, I'm sorry to bring up all these troubling things from the past here. We were hoping we could talk about more pleasant things, like I don't know what. Anyway, this is before we even get to the subject of the class, too. So you have this fight over should slavery be allowed to spread into the territories, and what happens is Congress says, why not? And this provokes a response from people who don't want slavery to spread into the territories. And why would they not want slavery to spread into the territories, you think? Yes.
Wasn't it like a balancing act?
I'm not sure how angry people get about wanting to balance things. It could be. Yes.
Every time you see no slavery in one state, and we're just into the compromise.
Okay, see, I think you're thinking too abstractly about this, and too rationally, I should say. What difference does it make to you if someone with slaves can or cannot move into a territory? No difference to you? Anyone else?
Well, people, jobs, slaves, they're free, they're paid. So, it's in the interest of like, well, it's just, they might feel that slaves will steal their jobs.
Or people with slaves will have an advantage over those who do not. And if the territories are open to the spread of slavery, it means free labor will be excluded from these territories because you won't be able to, people will not be paid. You can't get paid enough. You can't compete, free labor can't compete with slave labor. So that's kind of one of the ideas here, that if you allow slavery into the territories, it will exclude free labor from the territories. And thus, by the way, this is very important. Enslaved people didn't vote. And there were a lot of free people of color, but not enough in any state to tip any kind of a political balance. Women didn't vote. The only people who vote are white guys over the age of 21. In some cases, taxpayers by the 1820s, that whole thing had gone by the boards. So the people making this decision are people who will never be enslaved. So if you are against the spread of slavery, think how you would couch an argument so that people who will never be slaves will agree with you that this is bad for you. Someone else being enslaved is bad for you. And so that becomes one of the big issues here. And it's with the 1854 revocation of the Missouri Compromise in the Kansas-Nebraska Act that you see a new political party form to oppose the spread of slavery into the territory. This gets us back to what the gentleman was saying about an hour ago about slavery being the cause of all of this. And should slavery be allowed to spread into the territories? And at this time, by the way, there had been a two-party system kind of since the 1820s. The Democrats were one, the party of Andrew Jackson, and then I don't know what the other party was in the 1830s and 40s. Yes. No. Federalists is wrong by the words. You're going back a little too far.
Democratic Republicans.
No, the Democratic Republicans become the Democrats.
The Whigs?
The Whigs, is that what you're going to say? The Whigs. And the Whigs pretty much, you're going to say that too, right? Whigs. Yeah. The Whigs pretty much die out by the 1850s for reasons we don't need to talk about. And a new party forms to oppose the spread of slavery. And anyone know what this party is? The Republicans. They take their name, I should put there on this side because this is their party. And anyway, we don't need to get too much into this. Anyway, big contentious issue, slavery in the territories. I mentioned this senator getting beaten on the floor of the Senate. Civil war breaks out in Kansas. Does Kansas have slavery or not? And people who want slavery move there. People who don't want slavery go there, and they start killing each other. So this is what's happening in the 1850s. And in 1857, because, I was thinking about this earlier, and I know I put some slides together about all of this. I guess they didn't make it through. In 1857, the Supreme Court decides to solve this whole problem with a court case involving two people from the state of Missouri, Dred Scott and his wife, Harriet Scott, who were enslaved in Missouri. Their owner took them to Minnesota, lived there for a number of years. This is in the 1830s. come back to Missouri, and there's a long-standing principle that if you are enslaved, you can, or taken to a territory or a place where slavery is illegal, you cannot be returned to slavery against your will. So when the Scots are brought back to Missouri, they actually sue in the state court saying that they are wrongfully enslaved. And usually, a person bringing a suit of wrongful enslavement with evidence such as the Scots fraud would be set free, even in Missouri. But in this case, the courts in Missouri say, wait a minute. It used to be, there weren't these crazy abolitionists running around saying slavery is a bad thing. We don't want to say anything to give them ammunition. So the Scots lose their case. They sue again in federal court. And this time, the case gets to the Supreme Court. And in 1857, the Supreme Court sees this is really an opportunity to solve this whole problem of slavery in the territories. I saw some knowing nods when I mentioned Dred Scott and Harriet Scott. Does anyone know what the court said in their case? Yes.
They said that they don't have.
Yeah, the Scots cannot sue in federal court because they are not citizens of Missouri. Okay, and in order to sue in federal court, you need to be a citizen of the state. And at the time the Constitution was written, the court said the Scots, Black people could not be citizens of any state. And furthermore, the more important constitutional issue is that Congress does not have the power to prohibit slavery in territory. Because this deprives, can you imagine what the reasoning is in this? What constitutional provision prohibits Congress from prohibiting slavery in territories?
Was it the 10th Amendment?
Not the 10th Amendment. I'll put that in half. The Fifth Amendment, that private property cannot be taken without due compensation. That this is a deprivation of property by Congress to prohibit a person bringing enslaved people into federal territories. So the Missouri Compromise was unconstitutional. So this political party started off by saying we want to prohibit slavery in territories. The Supreme Court has just said Congress does not have the power to prohibit slavery in territories. Your platform is unconstitutional. So what would you do if you're Republicans?
Make them all states.
Like make
The territory states.
Yeah, but if a state can have or have not have slavery. I'm not quite sure where you're going with this.
But then you start to have control over the territories and their laws. In terms of like, you can pass something in the federal.
Maybe you get the first thing, Who citizens? Oh, you do that? Okay, that's gonna take a bit. So we're gonna have to catch up. We're never gonna get to the end of the Civil War at this rate. Yes. Okay, make a Republican president. Yes, okay. So I'm glad no one said give up, join the Democrats, because you can't win. The Supreme Court has spoken. They're the final word on this. They do say, hey, you know what? We think this ruling violates the Constitution, and that becomes the big issue. Okay. There's some interesting things being said about all of this before we got to the point of why there is a civil war. It's because of a constitutional crisis. And then, as you said, a Republican is elected in 1860, and he becomes president as states are seceding from the Union because he is president. And in his inaugural address, talks about this constitutional problem. By the way, in the long span of our nation's history, there were, 47 presidents, and only 4 inaugural addresses, I think, are really important to think about. So we don't worry, we're not going to be belaboring all of these. 2 of them are by Lincoln. Okay, so all profess to be content in the Union if all constitutional rights can be maintained. Is it true that any right plainly written in the Constitution has been denied? And he doesn't think that it has. Remember, these states are seceding because their constitutional rights have been denied. And then he talks also about this theory these states have that they can secede from the Union. And what kind of majority, if a majority should deprive a minority of any clearly written constitutional right, it might justify revolution. But he doesn't think this has been the case. And here he talks about what are the issues driving this secession movement. Shall fugitives from labor be surrendered by state or national authority? The Constitution does not expressly say. May Congress prohibit slavery in the territories? The Constitution does not expressly say. Must Congress protect slavery in the territories? The Constitution does not expressly say. So you have this disagreement about what the Constitution says about slavery in this area. Fugitives from labor, prohibiting slavery in territories, which is what the Republicans want, protecting it in the territories, which is what the Democrats want. In fact, the Democratic platform in 1860 called for protecting slavery in the territories. And in fact, the Congress in 1860, after states started seceding, proposed a constitutional amendment that would forbid the United States from doing anything about slavery in the states. The only constitutional amendment proposed that has the president sign it. That doesn't do anything, it's not ratified. And then he says that for questions of this class, all of our constitutional controversies spring, and we divide into majorities and minorities. And if the minority won't acquiesce, the government must cease. Okay? That's what happened in 1861. Lincoln becomes president, making this very long, very learned argument about the Constitution, constitutional controversies, and says that the United States will not do anything about slavery in the territory, in the states, but he doesn't want to start how the war start, but how the war does start. And by 1864, just to jump ahead, another presidential election, and the Democrats do something, by the way, the Democrats do something really smart. They nominate for president a very popular former general, George McClellan. He had been the commander of the Union Army, but he and the Democrats disagreed with Lincoln about making, and by 1863, Lincoln has made emancipation a goal of the Union. Previously, it had been give up rebellion. We're not going to do anything about slavery in your states, but we don't want slavery in the territories. And the Democrats see a chance because the Union doesn't seem to be winning the war. People get tired of wars, particularly if you're fighting a war. The Civil War is a very bloody conflict. And so people are tired of the war. Why shouldn't we go back to being one happy union? Allowing these states to have slavery, maybe dividing a line to California so there can be slavery south of the line, some other negotiated settlement, and thinking that people will vote for the popular, charismatic George McClellan instead of Abraham Lincoln. And anyone know what happens? Who wins? Lincoln wins, yeah, okay. Where McClellan doesn't. And part of the reason McClellan does not win is because by this time, well, a couple of things. Well, we don't need to talk about what's happening during the war, although it's much more interesting that I'm going to tell you about what happens. Okay, this is really where I meant to start off, but now we're so ago. I haven't seen Civil War on anywhere.
Yeah.
Between one in Washington, D.C. Any others?
Travelers Rest, South Carolina.
Travelers Rest, South Carolina.
Somewhere pretty much.
What is it? What is it?
Well, I was driving once and then, I got a little fuel, so I was passing by this place called Travelers, but the rest of that. at a gas station, and then right across the gas station, there was a huge store.
Really?
Yes, I needed some water, I went there. Everything in there was Confederate flags,
Okay,
literally every inch of the place.
okay. But that's not, maybe I phrased the question wrong.
No, and then they had all the plaques outside.
Okay,
There's a place. Yes.
that's in Pennsylvania, so not that south.
Oh.
Well, south of us, right, but Pennsylvania, Gettysburg? No. You know.
No, I was thinking, I never heard of
I
it.
went there, went there as a kid.
Fredericksburg, yes.
Oh, I've been to Fort Sumter.
Okay, South Carolina, okay. Are there any around here?
No.
You're saying no?
Well, there are monuments, but
General
there's no
Sumter.
like, battle.
Well, there's no battlefield, but monuments is what I was talking about, not battlefields.
It's general.
There's general, but
Top
there are
of the
states,
state.
excuse me.
Top of the stairs.
That's what,
Oh, yeah.
That's Sherman, right?
but
The column at the top, right in front of the state house. Is that?
that's Shaw, the Robert Gould Shaw Memorial. Hold on. Okay, so you're down in South Carolina, we've come up with monuments that are like a block away from us, which is, interesting. There's a point I was gonna make with these monuments when we get to it. But Hooker is there for no apparent reason. Tallest point in the common is a Civil War monument. The Soldiers and Sailors Monument. And you go to most towns in New England, Oregon, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, you'll find Civil War monuments. Because this is where people came from to fight in the war that mainly happened somewhere else. Pennsylvania does have a couple of a big battle. There's a battle apparently in Vermont, or a raid in St. Albans, Vermont. You didn't know that? Well, there's a difference between what the markers say. Here in Yankeedom, the markers will say something about, it's a monument to the soldiers and sailors who died in the rebellion. The War of the Rebellion. So, and in the southern states, the mayor likely will say the war between the states, holding on to this idea that the states can secede from union. The Lincoln administration and the United States do not acknowledge that states have the power to secede from the union. The Constitution is not a compact among the states. It is a contract among the people of the United States. And another part of that inaugural address, Lincoln talks about if the Constitution is a contract. Does anyone know anything about contract law? Lincoln was a contract lawyer. So he knows the Constitution. He knows contract law. Let's suppose you and I have a contract. And then I decide I don't like the contract. And I simply say, hey, no, we no longer have a contract.
Well, it depends if the contract is valid in the first place.
Okay, let's assume it's a valid contract. See, I'm trying to break the contract and you're trying to think of reasons why I should be able to break it.
Well, obviously you can't just like outright break a contract, you can go back and revise it.
Yeah, yes.
But if you break the contract or don't, fulfill the agreed to terms, liable of breaking
Yeah,
the contract,
correct.
then I can sue you.
One party cannot break a contract, cannot get out of a contract. You're breaking the contract. Okay, so that's what he says in his first inaugural address. He doesn't want them to leave the union. He doesn't think they. And he believes that in a lot of these southern states, there are small groups of vituperative hotheads who have whipped up this enthusiasm, gotten people to think we can leave the union. Most people, he thinks, do not want to leave the union, which is why he's making that long argument about none of your constitutional rights have been violated. And we're not going to make war on you. You won't have a war unless you fought. The last paragraph of that address, by the way, it says, well, I am loath to close. We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passions may have strained, they have not broken the mystic cords of memory, stretching from every patriot grave and battlefield to every heart and hearthstone over this broad land. And they will yet swell with the chorus of union when touched, as they surely must be, by the better angels of our nature. It's mystic cords of memory which bind us together. It's not a compact among states. It is this connection between citizens that holds us together. And he's echoing actually something James Madison had said in Federalist number 14. Hearken not to that unnatural voice that tells you that the people of this country can no longer live together as one family, as friends. And so Lincoln is trying to resurrect those mystic chords of memory. He knows that there are some crazy hotheads who think, yeah, we can secede. Most people want to remain in the Union. And what he hopes will happen is that people in these states that have not seceded will decide not to secede. And then the others will come to their senses. Yes.
I believe the revolution would seem like they're saying that the government of the bill returns to its essentially like, it's over on your constitutional vote. Versus when, like in the, for the secession, they're trying to just break the contract because it's no longer mutually beneficial. But I guess like, what's the angle on wanting to succeed rather than have a revolution? Because like one just like morally seems like just even like describing to someone like morality people to a cause.
That's a very good perspective on this. And in fact, in the southern states, the Confederacy forms a constitution. Their seal has George Washington on it. They maintain we are true to this original idea. It's these crazy Republicans who introduced this new way. So they are saying we're being true to something else. And you know, you're right. Is it a revolution or is it a trying to restore something that has been lost? Could you elaborate a little? It's an interesting idea.
I guess like just like in his inauguration, it's like he's laying it out. It's like okay, none of your concerns have been laid out in the Constitution. Therefore, you can't really have a revolution because we haven't done anything wrong. And so, like I guess like the way that like the way you laid out like a contract form, I don't know. It's just like I feel like it loses every reasonably. It loses every kind of like calling behind it. I don't know.
Well, that's what he's trying to do. So they don't really have a cause.
I mean, on their sense, it's like, why did they originally call it secession? So why are they seceding versus saying that we're revolting?
Because they don't, they're saying it's the other side that's changed the rules. So we are seceding from this new order because it's not the order we had signed up for. We signed up for an order where the states have sovereign power. And it's a compact or contract among states. And that the Republicans are changing the nature of it. Where the Dred Scott case, Chief Justice Taney says at the time the Constitution was written, the black man had no right to play man and found respect. Now they're saying, the Republicans are saying, actually that's wrong. In fact, it was wrong because there were black voting and other things with some of the states who were about blacks who were free. But you have this idea that this group of Republicans is proposing something new. We don't want that. So we are going back to our original understanding of the Constitution being a compact among states. It gets us into this philosophical argument that people often are, well, you're unlikely to have 600,000 people dying over a philosophical argument. There's also this practical argument. Do we gain more from having slavery or not, or allowing slavery to spread? So Lincoln is trying to allay this. Nothing has really changed. Everything is as it was. We have these disputes about what the Constitution means. And it's not, Constitution is not explicit on. And I'm not sure I'm answering your question because you've just given us a lot more to think about.
No, I think I guess it just the point was, at least what I'm taking from it is that rather than saying that there was like like, okay, they're interfering on our rights. It's more so that they've completely alienated the Constitution. So it's not worth it.
That's what they're saying, yeah. Okay, here's another case that comes up during the first months of the war. Maryland is a slave state. Washington is surrounded by Maryland and Virginia. Virginia has seceded. If Maryland secedes, it'll be really tough for Lincoln to carry on a government when his capital is surrounded by places that say we're not part of your country anymore. The Maryland legislature is going to meet at the end of April. What should Lincoln do about it? Should he stop them from meeting? Why not? He can, okay, one thing he does, he suspends the writ of habeas corpus in Maryland. Habeas corpus is a guarantee that if you are arrested, you have to be produced in court within 24 hours with charges against you. And there is a guy named Merriman who is involved with a group that's doing things like cutting telegraph lines, blowing up railroad bridges, other things to cut communication between Washington and Philadelphia and the rest of the country. So Mr. Merriman is arrested and is being held in Fort McHenry. And he has a lawyer who says, wait a minute, I want to writ of habeas corpus. And the military officers say, that's really too bad because habeas corpus is suspended in the state of Maryland. Yes.
What authority did Lincoln have or use to suspend it? Like, was it like an executive order or how did he kind of justify?
It's an executive order. In the Constitution, it does say the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus should not be suspended unless in cases of invasion or emergency it is necessary.
And it's up to the president's discretion.
Actually, Article 1 of the Constitution establishes what, so I lied when I said don't agree about the part 1 last couple. The Congress. Article 1 sets up the Congress. Article 1, Section 8 lists what the powers the Congress has. Article 1, Section 9 lists the things Congress cannot do. And Article 1, Section 9, the relevant clause here says the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended unless in cases of emergency or invasion, the public necessity requires. So who can suspend the writ of habeas corpus? According to Article 1, Section 9. It doesn't. This is great passive voice, can the writ of habeas shall not be suspended. It doesn't say who can suspend it in case of an emergency. So, but it's in Article 1. So does that mean yes?
I was gonna say, isn't it like implied since it's in Article 1?
You would say it's implied. So if you were Merriman's lawyer, you would say it's implied since it's in Article 1. And by the way, if you want a writ of habeas corpus against the government of the United States, where would you go to get it? It's a judicial order. So again, yet another piece of this. Article 2 sets up the executive, and Article 3, the judiciary. So you get a writ of habeas corpus from a judge. What judge would you go to? There were not that many judges back in 1851. So in this case, the judge is the presiding judge responsible for Maryland, who also happens to be the Chief Justice of the United States, Roger Taney. And I should have mentioned Chief Justice Taney because he was the Chief Justice who wanted to resolve this issue of slavery in the territory of Reign for its top decision. And now Lincoln, the president, has suspended the writ of habeas corpus in the state of Maryland, and Taney admonishes the president that he has to release Mr. Merriman because keeping him in prison is violating the oath that Taney had administered to Lincoln back on March 4th to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. And now Lincoln is violating the oath by not releasing poor Mr. Merriman, who is in Fort McHenry. Who here would release Merriman, by the way, if you were Lincoln, or you were the general in charge of Fort McHenry? No one would. he's saying that, you know. I think Justin was kind of leaning toward habeas corpus. Does the president have the power to suspend habeas corpus? Tony says no. Lincoln says yes. Because the Constitution doesn't say, and Lincoln says, did the framers of the Constitution imagine that there would only be emergencies when Congress was in session? Which is a good point. Congress didn't meet that often. So it's and then Lincoln makes much of the rest of this argument in his message to Congress on July 4th, 1861, where he also calls for 50,000 troops to put down the rebellion. So he says, and he also says, if by violating one law, I can save the Constitution, I'll do that. But he doesn't think any otherwise. The Chief Justice wants me to uphold one law and letting the rest of the Constitution go to pieces. If I can save it by violating, like I can only violate one law. I must not violate any law but one. Anyway, it's an argument, but this argument, compact or agreement between these people, is one that is only really resolved by war, by one side defeating the other. So that's what's happening here in 1861, 1865. I think more further questions on habeas corpus. By the way, the New York Daily News attacks Lincoln for this, saying that under Lincoln's become a tyrant. That is, by suspending habeas corpus, by using military power against civilians, he actually is violating the Constitution. I did once have a student take me to task for he thought being too sympathetic to Lincoln. He was from Texas, about being a tyrant and so on and so on. And so I took the argument, but I disagreed. Anyway. In 1863, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring that any person held as a slave in any state or any part of the state, the people thereof shall be at the time of this proclamation currently in rebellion against the United States, will be thenceforward and forever after free. Sounds kind of convoluted. One historian says it has all the moral grandeur of a bill of lading. Let me repeat it. Any person held as a slave in any state or any part of a state, the people thereof shall be currently in rebellion against the United States, will be thenceforward and forever after free. It's a military thing. And in fact, emancipation has begun as a military thing. In Fortress Monroe on the coast of Virginia, been there. A huge fort. And the commander there was one of my favorite Massachusetts political figures, Benjamin Franklin Butler. And General Butler was a Democrat. He was the adjutant general of the Massachusetts militia. He hated the governor of Massachusetts, who was a rabid abolitionist, John Andrew. Andrew was a Republican. Butler really didn't like Democrats. Butler didn't like a lot of people. But he's in charge of Fortress Monroe. This is in June of 1861. And three folks show up at the fort, three men. They say, we have been put to work by our masters building fortifications for the rebels. We don't want to do that anymore. Now, up in the area around Washington, where our friend McClellan was the general in charge, if a slave owner came to the Union lines and said, my slaves have escaped, we think they're somewhere in Washington, the Union Army would not only let them through the lines to find them, they would help apprehend fugitives. Because the war isn't about slavery, it's wanting these people to stop rebelling. Here at Fortress Monroe, similar situation. General Butler has these three people show up and say, we don't want to be working for the enemy. what would you do if you're General Butler? If you're General McClellan, you say, that's too bad. You go back to where you're supposed to be, because we're not here to free you. Yes. Well, you don't quite enlist them, but you say, under the laws of war, someone who is fighting against you can have and using their property against you. If we capture their property, the property becomes contraband. That is, we can take it. So these three individuals are contraband of war. So now you're on the Union lines, you'll work for us, but you're also going to get paid for it. By the end of the month, there are about 1,000 contrabands at Fortress Monroe. And this creates kind of a problem for, not really for General Butler, who has now 1,000 people that he's paying who are doing stuff. And there are 1,000 fewer people working for the Confederacy on the other side, which means if they need to dig ditches and do other things, they have to do it themselves. But it does create kind of an issue, and Congress passes a confiscation act saying that property used in the rebellion can be confiscated by the Union forces. This is an opening wedge toward emancipation. And in 1860, well, in order to get through all the steps of this, Butler then is sent to New Orleans when the Union retakes it. Until Hurricane Katrina about 20 years ago, people in New Orleans regarded Butler as the worst thing that ever happened to them. He was a guy who didn't suffer fools gladly, which may be a reason I like him. They think, boy, don't suffer fools. Well, anyway. So anyway, Lincoln issues the Emancipation Proclamation. Persons held in any state or a part of a state that people whereof shall be currently in rebellion against the United States. So who is actually freed by this? Yes. Yeah. These are the states that don't acknowledge Lincoln's authority. What effect will it have? How come?
If they don't listen to his story already, why would they listen to what he says?
That's a very good point. So why is this an important thing?
Is it more like symbolic?
I don't think it's symbolic, but yes, Stratford and
I mean, they kind of building on, like, wasn't it more like, because they were kind of like a lot about like secession and preserving the Union, but this gave like an actual cause and like purpose to a lot of like the war. And it was after Antietam or Gettysburg. Antietam, yeah, which was a Union victory for flooding.
yeah.
So was like, I feel like it was more like a this is what we're fighting for kind of proclamation.
Yes.
The original, like he said, I think it's just extending the terms for the, so it's like if they lose, I don't know, just in terms of at the end of the war.
Okay, so as Steph said, in September after, by the way, earlier in the year, Horace Greeley, who was an editor of the New York Tribune, an abolitionist, wrote to Lincoln saying, if you really wanted to win the war, which this is 1862, wasn't really going that well, you should make abolition the issue. And Lincoln writes back saying, if I could save the Union by freeing the slaves, I would do that. If I could save the Union by freeing no slave, I would do that. If I could save the Union by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would do that. What do you make of this? It's not saving the Union. At that moment, he'd already drafted an Emancipation Proclamation. So we kind of knew where this was going. And it's the second piece of the Emancipation Proclamation that I think is the more important one, not the any person, and then he lists the places that are in rebellion. Therefore, the people in these places now will be free if they ever acknowledge, if these places ever acknowledge the authority of the Union. But then the next line says, the military forces of the United States, including the Army and Navy thereof, shall use all measures to assist such persons in acts they may take to secure their freedom. So it's really, it's not a symbolic thing. It's a message to people enslaved in these places that we are going to support you in rebelling against your owners. And the Democrats, by the way, in the North don't like this, which is one reason they think they can win the election in 1864, because Lincoln has overstepped. Anyway, bless you. Did someone? Yes.
Everything you said about is peaceful, not an issue, and it doesn't matter if he just wants to keep the union together.
Yeah.
So is the Emancipation Proclamation just a ditch effort to get the slaves to rebel against their owners and get more people on his side, or like, why would he send out that proclamation? Like,
Well, that's a good
why
question.
behind it?
It's one of the things that makes Lincoln so interesting, figuring out why he is doing this. I think that he knows what he is doing. And he says the next step is to enlist Black troops. And he says the sight of 50,000 armed and trained Black soldiers on the banks of the Mississippi will end the rebellion in a month. And so this has become the issue. One reason, one of the many reasons the Democrats aren't happy with all of this. But Lincoln's aim is saving the Union, but once emancipation has become an issue, in fact, in 1864, he has this question he poses to the cabinet. It looks like we're going to lose the election. Should we give up on emancipation because it hasn't really worked and it's really unpopular, or should we stick with it? What would you think? Well, how would you advise Lincoln? You would say stick with it. So what Lincoln proposes to do then is to try to win the war before March 4th, 1865. Because he knows the Democrats will want to negotiate a settlement and they'll never get one because at this point, the Confederate States want to remain a country. So this is kind of an issue here. By the way, I had meant to talk about a lot of other things today. Somehow we got sidetracked into talking about Lincoln and the Civil War. Yes, Jeff.
Just mindful about the here and now. Like, did any of his decisions that he made, was like how we remembered like today? Did that ever affect anything?
Yes. In his annual message of 1864, I believe it is, he says that we cannot escape history. We will either, but it's not, how do I want people to remember me? He knows in order to have people remember him favorably, he needs to succeed in this work he is in of saving the Union. So I'm always a little leery when people talk about how they will be remembered because most of us are forgotten. So, but he is thinking about saving the Union. Yes.
So his main goal is to just save the union
Yes.
by trying to tell like some slavery, or is it like, I think,
After 1863, it becomes saving the Union without slavery. So that message to Congress talking about we will either boldly save or meanly lose the world's last best hope. He's saying that because he's proposed a constitutional amendment to end slavery. And he wants Congress to adopt it. And he tells them that if they don't, the next Congress will. 1862, midterm elections, typically the party in power loses seats, the Republicans do, and this Congress doesn't really want to pass. Yes. No problem. No problem.
I was just, is there any nuance to the, to like the Northern Democrats? Because I feel like, at least in my understanding, you know, like obviously in hindsight, like the Southern economy was just like so like incredibly behind the Northern economy. And like, there's also like having nowadays, people are like, okay, like slavery versus just like paid labor is less economically efficient as well. And so it's like, were they drinking the same Kool-Aid or like as like?
Well, actually, the Southern economy was doing pretty well. And in fact, this is one reason they were so emboldened because they were producing cotton that was the leading American export. And in fact, one senator from one of the southern states said, you dare not war against cotton because cotton is king. And so we're producing cotton. It was also why they expected the British would come to their aid, because the British textile mills depended on cotton from the southern states, although the British also were getting cotton from India, Egypt, a lot of other places. It was a major miscalculation. Northern Democrats see both this is important. Also, there are a lot of things the Republicans were doing that would cause rational people to think they're a bunch of kooks, because there were things like the state of Maine barred the manufacture or sale of alcohol. So the Maine law, something the Republicans' main focus was stopping the spread of slavery into the territories, but there are other kinds of people in the Republican Party who support things like the Maine temperance. Or yes.
So like, you were talking about like the more people was the north and south, of the north they want slavery, like that, like they lived with those kind of slavery down the south and not really know the people want to spread it because it's like where these like the Democrats of North Carolina like where they don't want slavery. Or
The Democrats, it's a very good question. I go to Justin, but it's a fair thing. The Democrats in the North don't want federal government that will intrude in their states. That's one thing they don't want. They see other issues. Stephen A. Douglas is one of the great Democrats, and what he wants is economic development. He wants to build a railroad to the Pacific Coast. He's the Democratic nominee for president in 1860. The Democrats split. The mayor of New York, blanking on the name of the mayor of New York in the 1860s, Fernando Wood. He's doing what mayors of New York do, running the city. And the New York does have trade with the southern states, but it's they see the Republicans as kind of fanatics on an abstract issue. A lot of Irish Catholics are Democrats, because the Democrats have been more supportive of immigrants. The old Whigs were not so much. But by the way, in the 1850s, before the rise of the Republicans, when the Whigs are falling apart, one of the big new parties that starts is the American Party, also known as the Know Nothing Party. They say the problem isn't slavery. The problem is all these immigrants who are changing the nature of American society. So the Democrats tend to be more friendly to immigrants and offering jobs and other things. So there's more nuance, simply that all of the North was against slavery. Most white Southerners did not own slaves. And most Northerners, this is why this argument about allowing slavery into the territories will prevent free labor from moving there. That's really an argument pitched to Democrats. This is good. You're asking really good questions. Other questions on this? Or other things maybe I have obscured that you knew before, which has now become hopelessly, yes. Yeah, okay, one thing that happens in the Underground Railroad is, again, that's the issue of fugitives. Tell fugitives by whom will they be delivered. And some Democrats do come over and join the Republic. And what happens once the war begins, a lot of Democrats support the war. Stephen A. Douglas starts raising troops for the Union, because now it's not, we can say the Republicans brought this on, but the country's under attack. The flag has been attacked. So that becomes the rallying cry. In New York, there are riots against the draft in 1863. But in Boston, most Irish support the war. And they see the war as a way of securing their own place in American society. Anyone know, by the way, the first Irish Catholic elected to office in Boston? There's a statue of him in the public garden. Narrow it down. Speaking of Civil War monuments. Thomas Cass. He was the head of a group called the Columbian Guards. It was an Irish militia unit. And in the 1850s, when the Know Nothings, the American Party, takes power in Boston, in Massachusetts, the first thing they do is disarm this Irish unit. So the Columbian Guards were no more. When the war starts, Cass forms the 9th Massachusetts Volunteer Regiment, and they have a green flag with a harp on it. And they're presented to them by Mrs. Harrison Gray Otis, who's like the grande dame of Boston society. So you have the Irish joining in this war to save the Union, which will also be a war to end slavery. I could go on. I wanted to tell you a little bit about what to expect to do over the course of the semester, other than coming here and entertaining ourselves by talking about all this stuff, which we will get back to on Monday. So, are there any questions about the actual stuff before I tell you about all the exciting projects you'll have to do over the course of this?
But is the class past the Civil War or included in the Civil War?
Most of the class will be past the Civil War. This may be the last time we talk about the Civil War. Why, are you happy with that?
Well, I'm getting quite a refresher course.
Okay,
Good. I'm
because
sorry.
the Civil War, as it changes everything. And so next time we'll talk about some of the changes that come about as a result of the Civil War. One is the constitutional amendment passed by Congress in 1865 to end slavery. That neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for a crime whereof the subject shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States. Yes, Bill.
When you talk about Congress, like during this time, during the war, does that include the southern states or is it just the?
No, they had left. So this is something that happens too. There have been Democrats really controlling Congress. They all leave. So in 1861 and 2, the Congress passed all kinds of things the Republicans had wanted to do. A Homestead Act to set up small farms in the territories. A land grant act to give federal land in states to build colleges and other things. Yes.
Sorry, so what you just said there kind of dropped. So the reason why I asked about the economy of the South is because it was like, even if we had more, like in the North had more agricultural land, but was that like prior to the Civil War or was that after?
The North had a lot of agricultural land, tended to be small farms, no slavery. So you're working or you're hiring your labor. The North also had more industry, and the North's population was growing faster than the South population, which was another reason why the South seceded, because they saw we'll never be able to have a state. By the way, John C. Calhoun, who is really the great intellectual architect behind this whole idea, senator from South Carolina, they kind of seen this happening, that the South will always have a minority population and will always then be subject to the votes of people in the rest of the country. That's not fair. So Calhoun suggested this idea of a concurrent majority. To be elected president, not only do you have to get a majority of the votes in the country, but a majority of the votes in each section, or in a majority of the sections. And then he came up with even a better idea. Instead of having one president, we should have two. And Calhoun spent about 30 years talking about his deep study of the Constitution, doing it so much people believed that he knew what he was talking about. Calhoun, interesting character. Probably could do a whole course on Calhoun, starting with the hair, I think. But anyway, I'm not sure what the question was, but you got me talking about Calhoun. Anyway, should we talk about the syllabus at all? Should we put it to a vote? Okay. Okay, so read the syllabus. I've put on a lot of cases and other things for you to read. We have some papers to do over the course of the semester. There is, by the way, on the course Canvas site, a discussion board where I will post questions which you are to answer. And, you know, there are other things I was going to tell you about. You're going to write 3 essays over the course of the semester. Not everyone's worried about AI. I try to construct things. Where did I go? I don't know, well, I do know how I feel about it, I feel like it's cheating, but colleague, it's great, use it all the time, edit your papers, and, I still have an uneasy feeling about it.
Are we allowed to use AI as a mentor, like an enhancer?
I would prefer you not do it, but then the question is, how will I know? In fact, I really like it when I find a student making grammatical errors and doing these kinds of things. Now, I know Justin's gonna tell AI, put in some grammatical errors.
We'd be like,
Use double negatives, split infinitive, so
if you encourage that, will that like
I don't-
reflect the grade,
if I encourage what?
like grammatical? No, I'm
I
not
don't encourage
no,
it.
no, obviously you don't encourage grammatical errors, but like, well, then you'd be more lenient towards like like that aspect of the grading.
Okay, so this gets to the fundamental question for me, what am I supposed to be teaching? See, for you, this is just another tool I can use to get through this. For me, it's an existential crisis about my life's work, being rendered meaningless. What do you think of that? You thought it was just about your grade in the class, and I think, boy, this guy's got really serious issues. Yeah. What do you think?
I think you should value your life's work.
Thank you. That's the nicest thing anyone said to me in years. Other thoughts on this? I mean, it makes it easy. You start writing something, the computer says, hey, can I help you with this? Let me do it. And I don't know. I really feel for you guys, because when you are in my position 40 plus years from now, really, this is what keeps me awake at night. Not me, it's you.
It could be like a Terminator, you know, like AI takes over.
I think so, yeah. So you've seen this movie?
Yeah, I think it's gonna kill us all. It's like it's gonna hack the nuclear codes of.
Wow, this is really, yeah.
Take a turn.
Wow.
Take a turn.
Before the world ends, let me just see who is here. Brandon is here, Isaac, thank you, Justin, Alejandro Diaz, okay, thank you. Neve is here, James Inamorati not here. Jada Mendez, thank you. Nolan Paquette, thank you, sir. Pranava, no, okay, Daniela Petronio, thank you. Caitlin Porter, thank you. Rebecca Rourke, okay, Scott Romano, Alessa Rosario, thank you. Andy Sue, no. Cassie Thompson, yes. Max Toomey, not here, but he said he was going to tune in online. Hannah Wallen going twice. Okay, so next time we will get past the Civil War, unless of course the world ends, as Pranava thinks may be imminent, and we will see what else is what. So enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll see you on Monday. Take care. Yes. Yes, yeah, okay, would we just get them on? Yes, get them on your own, yeah. Okay. So they're listed on the silver. So I want on you. And some of them you can get at the library or, we'll talk more about that. Thanks. Take care, Brandon.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.